2, 3, 4, beat it, do ta do ta do. Did it? Who put this bowling ball right where I'm standing? Right on my mark. Did it? Hi, everybody. My name is Jimmy. Pixels. Hi. I spent more money than I really honestly have at the comics. It's like I got my tax return, my federal tax return last week, and I went, and then I got a new apartment, and I'm like, oh no, I have to put a deposit down. Yes, that's right. We're going to be changing studios here at Wednesday I'm in Love Limited, very limited, and I'm into it. All right, first up this week from the upstart publisher Marvel Comics, we have Shang-Chi #1 versus the Marvel Universe. I'm very excited. Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, has been one of my favorite characters for some time. I'll grant you, not when I was a kid. He was not around a whole lot in the 80s and 90s when I was a lad. But as I got older and I got into the more Bronze Age stuff, really, and I've really gotten more into Master of Kung Fu just over these last few years, thanks Marvel Unlimited app, which I will also have to scrape together some money to pay for soon. I haven't seen the trailer for the new, is it a movie or a show? Look it up. And I don't really care. But the good news is whenever a comic book property becomes a TV show or movie, they immediately start printing a new series, and I'm all for it. This is written by Jean Luan Yang. I'm probably mispronouncing it as this, who I don't know has written a lot for Marvel. I want to say that with the whole Atlantis attacks, yeah, that's right. So within the last couple years, Marvel has made a real concerted effort to have more Asian representation in their funny books. And so there's like a whole, it's not like Milestone or something like that, where it's, marked like, hey, it's for the Asians. But I mean, there's a lot of books that centered around the Asian characters, of which there aren't a ton, obviously, in the Marvel Universe. They've been coming up with more and more lately, though. And I don't think any of those books really went anywhere. And if I'm being 100% honest, it's because they weren't that great. I like the characters, Swordmaster and White Fox, and who's the Filipino gal? They're fun characters, and Yang is a great writer. Yang wrote the new Superman in the Justice League of China for DC a few years back, which was one of my most favorite, like, kind of recent DC books, because it was, kind of D-list, which is what I like. But I mean, and of all the characters that Marvel, all their Asian American characters, well, Shang-Chi is straight up Chinese. He's not American, I don't think. I don't know how they're going to do it now either, because back in the 70s, the origin story was that Shang-Chi was raised in feudal China by his father, Fu Manchu, Shang-Chi idolized his father and thought he was a great man, and then he found out he was actually an evil villain. And so he left home, I'm out of here, and then he leaves his village and he ends up on the F train. He's like, oh, it's New York City in the 1970s this whole time, which is still in my top 10 of goofiest origin stories I've ever heard. So it was like a recreation of feudal China beneath New York City that Fu Manchu had created. And I'm pretty sure they dropped that. That was in Marvel Special Edition number 15, and I think it wasn't long before that never came up again. So it was just Shang-Chi out in the world, mostly working with British intelligence for some reason, even though he was... And that's it. I'm like, is he technically from New York then? I don't know. Shang-Chi #1. That'll be fine. But yeah, so of all the Asian characters that Marvel has been trying to highlight, it's like they're trying to throw Asian characters and see what sticks. Ms. Marvel is pretty popular, and she'll be in one of the movies right soon, I think, or the TV show, and now Shang-Chi. So, yeah. Cannot recommend the early Master of Kung Fu enough. Doug Monk, Paul Gulacy, their best work. And that's saying a lot. Also, this week, I bought Godzilla Monsters and Protectors #1 and 2. Number 2 came out this week, but I'd missed this issue. But fortunately, there was... Oh, this is 2, sorry. This came out this week. #1 came out. Now, I will admit, like, especially given this cover, I was like, oh, this looks more like a cartoon. I believe, and if I'm not mistaken, there was a cartoon series in the 90s that was very Captain Planet-y, which is what makes me think of this, too, where you got these kids and they're the good guys and Godzilla's like their muscle. So, and I do think that is what it is. The main reason I ended up buying it, though, is because it's by Burnham and Schoening. Chris, or Eric Burnham. Now I gotta check. Yeah, Eric Burnham. Chris Burnham is another comic book artist. Eric Burnham and Dan Schoening are the creative team on this book from IDW. And these two guys have done the bulk of their Ghostbusters books for IDW. So that was the main reason. I do like Godzilla, more into King Kong, frankly. In the recent movie, I was rooting for the big monkey. But I still like Godzilla a lot. I just like, it's because I personally, as an African American, am just more into King Kong. It's so stupid. There is a line. There is a line in an old song by the Lynch Mob that says, "White boys like Godzilla, but my super N-word King Kong played his ass like ping pong." And that's a lyric that I live my life by. And then finally this week, I got two books that I'm super excited for. Which one will I open with? Here we have Red Room #1 by little Eddie Piscor. Ed Piscor, I'm a huge fan of. Do I have any of his work up behind me? I don't believe so. He's mostly, his biggest thing has been the Hip Hop Family Tree, which is, as it might sound, a comic book history of hip hop starting from the mid 70s. And I think he really only goes up to like 86. And he also did in the same sort of, and he did those books in the 1970s Treasury edition size. And then he also did similar for Marvel, X-Men Genesis, which was a historical retelling of like the X-Men in chronological order. And he draws like a really nice narrative. Like he simplified, it's basically like a recap of all of the X-Men up until, gosh, I want to say at least the 90s. Ed Piscor is like my age. He's a couple years younger than me. And he's very big into Bronze Age Marvel and into classic era hip hop, which are two things I also love very much and grew up on. And so now he's turning his attention to a horror comic, and he's been posting, previews of it all for a while now on his Instagram and stuff. And I try not to look too closely. I was a little surprised that Warren had any of these. I mean, it was one in my bag. He must have remembered. But I said that, and he's like, "Oh, I love Episcore." So I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." He's not as in. Warren is into the indie stuff down there, and he does get a lot of it. Like this next book, which is even more of a surprise. But there's a lot of stuff that I asked for that he goes, "Where the hell did you think of it?" And including this Crime Destroyer #1, Crime Destroyer, True Till Death #1. This is, I believe, a one-shot with a lovely, lovely cover by Mr. Shaky Kane himself. And Starkings is on board with this. This is another entry in the all-time comics pantheon. Crime Destroyer is a regular character. Right, Josh Simmons, and there was another Josh that wrote a lot of these. All-Time Comics is an homage / parody / homage again of 80s and 90s superhero comics, especially the kind of the dark and gritty ones. Hence why you have a character named Crime Destroyer. They're over the top, they're ridiculous, and they're very of my childhood, so I really, really enjoy them. And this, I was convinced I would have to ask him to order me one, but there was shelf copies. I did have to go. It was a good thing I grabbed the last one, or I would have been a little frustrated. It wasn't nearly, like when I was down there last week, it was so busy, and I had a bunch of books missing, and it was a whole thing. Picks up, and then I'm doing the thing again where I forget that it's picks of last week next, as if it's not the same thing every day for, what is this, my 80th? Something like that. Oh, you don't look a day over 79, Jim. All right, last week was a good, I'm all caught up now, I'm happy to announce. And boy, I love comics. I also even went and bought some stuff from Lone Star last week, and I was going to bring it in and talk about it, but it was all garbage. It's all just stuff that I I guess I should have. I don't know. I'll go grab it maybe. Well, we're already at 10 minutes. How the hell? All right, so last week I read X Corp #1. This was very good. A lot of these X books I think are going. They're going to do a big crossover called the Hellfire Gala, or Gala, however you want to say it. Which I don't think is it is a crossover, but it's an It's an inter department crossover, so it's just for the X books. So they're going to do like the next issue will cross over to the Hellfire Gala, but then I think Marauders is ending. I think Hellions is ending, or X Factor. X Factor's for sure ending, and I think Marauders is ending, and I don't think Hellions is actually ending. It almost doesn't matter because at this point, I'm still buying every single X book that they're putting out. They're all top quality, so they can cancel one and replace it with another. I'm not going to remember. I'm just going to think of this all as the Hickman era a few years from now, and I won't be able to remember particular books. I also, last week, I read these spin-offs from the Heroes Reborn sort of mini event that they're doing right now, which is so much fun. So having read now the first 2 issues of Heroes Reborn, as well as these 2 fill-ins, I can say that this is basically the fact that Jason Aaron is highlighting Hyperion and the rest of the Squadron Supreme is no... It's not just that he likes those characters, but he's also basically making... it's his version of the DC universe. He's going in kind of the opposite direction that what's his name Gruenwald went in, where Mark Gruenwald, for those not in the know, wrote what many consider to be the definitive Squadron Supreme series, but he went from it being a Justice League analog into just telling a whole nother kind of story. It wasn't really a superhero story anymore. It was really more of a world building, one of those what would happen if people really did have superpowers and all that sort of the notion of free will versus choice and all that stuff. But this is just Jason Aaron is like, well, the Hulk is Bizarro now, and I'm like, okay, yeah, great, let's do that. And so Hyperion and the Imperial Guard. These are the adventures of a young Hyperion with the Imperial Guard, who are what's the race that they're from? Gladiator, and they are Shi'ar. I don't know why that. So the Imperial Guard are Shi'ar, but this is Legion of Superheroes. This is Jason Aaron doing Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, and it's super fun. And then this here, Peter Parker and the Amazing Shutterbug, is Jason Aaron doing Jimmy Olsen. So in this universe, Peter Parker doesn't have any powers, and he's just a photographer for the Daily Bugle. And Hyperion can... That's the funnest thing, is because he's writing Hyperion the way Hyperion should be written, which is a cocky-ass Superman. It's a Superman who, like with Mark Gruenwald, is like... Well, actually, he's more cruel than Mark Gruenwald's version, but Hyperion is basically, Superman was like, you know what? I'm going to have to just go ahead and become ruler over all of you, because you are all just going to kill each other if I don't. And so he kind of looks down his nose at Peter Parker as being like, oh, he thinks he's my pal. But Peter Parker's like, this guy killed my aunt. Spoiler. And then finally last week I read, maybe I'll go grab those Punishers. Nah, I don't think I'll bother. I also read Poison Flowers and Pandemonium by Richard Sala. This was really, really good. It really made me kind of sad that Richard Sala has been dead for about a year now. He died early on in the quarantine, and I don't know if it was for COVID. Hell, I couldn't even find his birth date online after he died. He's not very much celebrated outside of the comic book field. I also didn't realize this guy's got so many books from Fantagraphics that I don't have, so that perked me up a little bit. It's like, well, at least there's still tons of stuff. Most of Richard Sala's work I'm aware of is from the MTV anthology show Liquid Television from the early 90s, which he contributed quite a bit to. And also, he would occasionally do a standalone issue or like a comic book series. And so I have an issue here, an issue there stuff. And then he would show up in anthologies all the time, so I'd have those. But this might be I think this is the first Richard Sala book I've ever owned. And it is really good, although it is pretty clearly I say, so the first story is the sequel to Bloody Cardinal, which was a book that he did in 2017. Yeah, and really could have just been another standalone story. Or maybe he was going to do more. And then 2 of the other stories are really less stories than there are a series of pinups. And Richard Sala was he's very into old monster movies. He was very into, this sort of women in distress thing. which I try not to think too hard about. But it is like a running theme in comics, especially in the sorts of crap that I like. So like it's all very 50s and 60s, some like even earlier golden age stuff, which I realize is not very forward thinking. But if there's one thing I like, it's monsters threatening women. Just reminds me of my high school days. And then yeah, so there's that one, and then there's an even less woke story where it's about like it's kind of like women on a prehistoric planet sort of a thing. Um, yeah, what I like to think of this sort of thing as a classic pervert. This is the stuff. This was the stuff that guys like me would beat off to relentlessly in the 50s. So I like it, to be honest. I'm not beating off to it, but I like the look of it. I think it's a fun aesthetic, and I'm not sure why I'm defending myself, especially because nobody watches this. This is gonna go here now. I also bought. I'm not gonna bother dragging it in here, but I bought Punisher Year One, which is a 4-issue series that came out in 1994, which was a time where I was not reading superhero comics at all at that point. I don't even know if I was really reading any indie stuff, although I'm pretty sure I was. I never really stopped with the indie stuff. It just didn't come out weekly like the superhero stuff always did. So it's 4-issue miniseries. It's obviously, the year one is pretty self-explanatory. It was written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, who went on to become they went on to become a very, very big writing team from the late 90s into the early 2000s. The version of the Guardians of the Galaxy that you're familiar with from the movies, that was them. That was their big break. And then they wrote a bunch of other stuff after that. They mostly wrote Guardians for a very long time, but they wrote a lot of Marvel's cosmic stories, and they were really good. This Punisher story, though, not so much. It's fine. I mean, it was before Garth Ennis got a hold of the character, and to me, that's the canon origin story. So, like this version of the whole story, or the Castle family accidentally witnesses a gangland execution in Central Park, and they're all summarily shot down. Frank is the only one to live, and he goes on to become the Punisher, killing criminals in revenge, or to punish those criminals for their crimes. And it's fine. And it was drawn by Dale Eaglesham, who would go on to draw Fantastic Four when Jonathan Hickman was writing it, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Not his best work in '94. So good. I'm glad I made that book report on a book I didn't even bring in here to show. It was still good. I mean, it was still fun though, because that's the thing, is that I'm going back to the '90s and buying a lot of crap that I didn't buy then, or that I bought and didn't like then. And now I'm enjoying it from a different angle. Like, oh, how stupid this stuff is. It's fun. Like, I'm going to go see the Mortal Kombat movie for the same reason. I didn't even like the video game that much when I was a kid, but it was a huge deal. So it's like, I'll go watch this stupid movie. I don't care. I'm A-list. That's a different thing. All right. I think that's everything for this week. Bye. Ba ba boop ba boop ba.